In this century and moment of mania, tell me a story. Make it a story of great distance and starlight. The name of the story will be Time, but you must not pronounce its name. Tell me a story of deep delight.
Well, I started flying around Kentucky about, well, I came here in '39. I started flying in earnest about 1940. I've been flying, though, since I was about 36. The flood was 1963. That, I guess, is about the most famous shot I've made around Kentucky. I won 9 awards on that one shot. And Kentucky, I'm not native Kentucky, but it's my favorite, I think, because I've lived here most of my life. And it's like the Indians, it's just a beautiful, happy ground.
I couldn't live the life of a poet all my life. That was for my younger days. I'm not concerned about how people are going to think about me. I don't think they will. There'll be other people. And writing can be taken too seriously, but not by me. And my writing just happened. I don't think of myself as a writer at all, or a teacher. I have nothing to sell, really. Except I say I think people should try to be their own best selves.
For me, you know, I never had a profession other than just being a poet, you know, and that made it tough. It still makes it tough. You know, because that's all I ever wanted to be, really, actually. This used to be my mother's church, right there, where it says "Tune Out Rats" on the door. Those guys are friends of mine. My brother's in the upholstery business also, and this is, I used to bartend here. This is where I had that gunfight. It's burned out. My brother lives right here in the White House with the yellow trim. The apartment building that was right there in that lot, I papered my kitchen walls with rejection slips.
Long ago in Kentucky, I, a boy, stood by a dirt road in first dark and heard the great geese hoot northward. I could not see them, there being no moon and the stars sparse. I heard them. I did not know what was happening in my heart. It was a season before the elderberry blooms. Therefore, they were going northward. The sound was passing northward.
I head for the mountains every time I get a chance, because I like the people, I like the scenes, and I like West Kentucky. I like all of Kentucky. First snows of Kentucky is always on the top of the mountain of Lynch, which is about 4,600 feet, and that's the highest point in Kentucky. The beauty of it's just, you can't imagine you see it and photograph it.
Death in the forest. I was born humble. At the foot of mountains, my face was set upon the immensity of earth and stone, and upon oaks full-bodied and old. There is so much writ upon the parchment of leaves, so much of beauty blown upon the winds, I can but fold my hands and sink my knees in the leaf pages. Under the mute trees I have cried with this scattering of knowledge, beneath the flight of birds shaken with this waste of wings. I was born humble. My heart grieves beneath this wealth of wisdom perished with the leaves. White highways. I have gone out to the roads that go up and down in smooth white lines, stoneless and hard. I have seen the distances shortened between 2 points, the hills pushed back, and bridges thrust across the shallow river span. To the broad highways and back again I have come, to the creek bed roads and narrow winding trails, worn into ruts by hoofs and steady feet. I have come back to the long way around, to the far between, the slow arrival. Here is my pleasure most, where I have lived and called my home. Oh, do not wander far from the roof tree and the hill-gathered earth. Go not upon these wayfarers measured with a line drawn hard and white from birth to death. Oh, quiet and slow is peace, and curved with space, brought back again to this warm, homing place. Heritage. I shall not leave these prisoning hills, though they topple their barren heads to level earth, and the forests slide uprooted out of the sky. Though the waters of Troublesome, of Trace Fork, of Sand Lake rise in a single body to glean the valleys, to drown lush pennyroyal, to unravel rail fences. Though the sunball breaks the ridges into dust and burns its strength into the blistered rock, I cannot leave. I cannot go away. Being of these hills, being one with the fox stealing into the shadows, one with the newborn foal, the lumbering ox drawing green beech logs to mill, one with the destined feet of man climbing and descending, and one with death rising to bloom again, I cannot go. Being of these hills, I cannot pass beyond.
A letter to Jesse Stewart. I look into the eyes of the land and hear your voice, telling of berries bursting from June, where teens eat the heart of hayrides. You tell of the land and people from the mist of honeysuckle vines, and I know the sweet smell is on your lips, and the rolling frost of November in Kentucky. But tell me of his bite through icy cracks in the west end of landlord shacks, where the rich pig bloats in his suburb cyst and rots the soul of youths. Tell me of the urban friends and sharing of the cornbread pone, and I know you cannot say this. And I am presumptuous about the bitter black man, about the wealth of doctors and lawyers and other brains who eat the slop of profit like hogs from the trough. I know you have felt the hungry eyes of the foreign infant and the broken parent dumb with love, selling VD for a loaf of bread, when your hair hung down in silver threads and your wisdom was naive, in the morning of Kentucky spring, the clear water still damp on your bare feet. You laugh in sprinkles of love and take a man at his word in honest fields of corn and rice. But where are the concrete fields of peace to match a pear tree's golden August?
This is Portland. There's a lot of that goes on. Who can drink the most, who can fight the most, who's the meanest, who's the toughest, who's the honoriest. You know, a power trip. I came down to a decision. I could either go crazy, die, or get sober, stay sober. I used to walk my children to grade school down through this street, this Lytle Street.
I don't see how people really carry a sense of the future unless they have a sense of the past. I have two children, both of whom plan to be artists, are working hard at it. And they were undoubtedly working about another world. And the world they look at is not the world I looked at the same age. Their work would be different. It doesn't need to be any worse, and I hope it'll be better. Audubon serves an example as a perfect artist in his absolute passion for what he was doing. He'd pay any price to do it. And he wandered around penniless up and down the Mississippi Valley. He rather enjoyed being a mysterious character that wandered around and nobody knew too much about. I began to read him, and his marvelous reading, besides the pictures themselves. And I was interested in that period very much, the whole pre-Civil War period of early America. I learned a great deal about memoirs and letters and things of that sort. And got the poem started back in the 40s. Then I lost it again. I died over hands, as many do. And just died. I couldn't go on. The plan was wrong. I can see now what was wrong with it. It was too sort of narrative. And 20 years later, in the 60s, I started reading him again. And suddenly I saw I did a different way. I write about him as a type rather than about it as an individual. To stick to the facts of his life and draw from his journals and quote from him and so forth. A more fluid, more open treatment. In glimpses and fragments, angles on his life, rather than trying to make the life as a frame. And I saved one line from the original poem I happened to stick in my head, and I made that the first line of this present poem.
Was not the lost Dauphin, though handsome, was only base born and not even able to make a decent living, was only himself, Jean-Jacques, and his passion. What is man but his passion? So, eastward and over the cypress swamp the dawn, rather than meet, break, and the large bird, long neck out thrust, wings crooked to skull air, moved in his slow calligraphy, crank, flat, and black against the color of God's blood spilt, as though pulled by a string. Saw it proceed across the inflamed distance. Moxon sat in hoarfrost, eyes fixed on the bird, thought, on that sky it is black. Thought, thinking, Pardea occidentalis heron, the great one. Dawn, his heart shook in the tension of the world. Dawn, and what is your passion?
I wanted to show people what I see and the way I see it, whether it be a mountain or a wildflower, a minute spot or a large spot. If you remember, the old artists in the old days would make woodcuts, and they would never draw a scene of a town from the ground. It would be what they interpret from the air. It would be a shot, a scene depicted from the waterfront or from the town front with the streets trailing off from their back. This is before photography existed.
Thurfew was my pen name at the time, and so I just called this thing Thurfew Visits the Dead. I smoke grass and drop speed pills. I walk in the graveyard among tombstones of all sizes and shapes and epitaphs. I read the names and relations. The dead rise and walk with me as I become aware of their living moments. One woman is identified as the wife of her husband. The tombstone is large, but the woman has no name. I engage many aging men in passing, misty hemp clouds gathering at my knees, shining in amphetamine beams from my eyes. I talk to the men seeking some of myself. I surprise them all in electric verbosity. They answer me in river saloons. I see my agony in their eyes. I feel my ecstasy in their hearts. I sway and sing in their banjo music. Fresh river winds on the face of their women. Born 1835, died 1870. I rush through their moments here. They laugh in response to my questions. I am still alive and young. Their eyes are not dark and vacant in the electric beam of my flashlight eyes. I see their all-lamp scenes of joy. I weep in the silence of their heartache. I dance in their riverfront hoedowns. They are amazed when I know them, confront them, and comfort them. And the graves are warm in dark shadows when I sit down and lean on the markers, smoking my dreams across the lawn.
Graveyard. Nothing has moved in this town. Nothing at all. Only the soundless dark and the wonder of night that came like wind unseen have wandered down these final streets. Only the silent have come upon this mark. There is no town so quiet on any earth, nor any house so dark upon the mind. Only the night is here, and the dead, and the hard, blind eyes of hill and tree. Here lives sleep. Here the dead are free. I'm supposed to act the part of a writer, be a writer, but I don't even think of myself as a writer. It never occurs to me I'm anything but a writer. I'm a farmer, gardener, amateur naturalist, amateur geologist, sort of a school teacher, librarian for a long time. Anything but a writer. Oh, I'd be glad to be one. Nothing against that. It's just that I never thought of myself as a writer. I never thought I would write enough to be called a writer. And I'm always surprised when people do, which I have on occasion. I've even been called a poet. I don't know what to think. I know my father might not approve of having a son who was a poet. Poetry is not a profession. Some people think of it as an art. And I have the highest regard for it. And I regret that I haven't written better, couldn't write better. But I did write the best I knew how. I always felt I had very little control of the matter.
That's what I used to look like, a character out of Marvel comic books called Ego Prime. And Odin sent Ego Prime down on Earth to do away with evil on Earth as the most evil. And then Odin wasted him, wiped him out. But I suppose that my son saw some of this in me, and I look so much like this character that he drew this poster. This poem is about my younger life. When I was a young man rushing through those changes, unforbidden by blood, I sought the same by peace. It was flesh bruises by the life. I was a strong man, gushing for the touch of war sweat. We clashed head on. We tumbled on the sweet lay. We crashed unpatriotic into the dream loft, smelling of smoke and dust. When I was a young man rushing through those lovers, I left no guilt box in my pocket. I was a wrong man, stepping in bold strokes, leaving yesterday in my tracks. We took a week for one day, we took a week for one night by the doctor. When I was a young man rushing from one assassination to the other, justice came to me in flashes between the lines.
We never know what we have lost or what we have found. We are only ourselves and that promise. Continue to walk in the world. Yes, love it. He continued to walk in the world.
And Audubon didn't know who he was for a long time. He was a born dropout, the kind of summons that every father despairs of having, you see. And a man named Wilson walked in the store and tried to get this no-good storekeeper to subscribe to a book on birds. But this gave him the idea, I'll make a book, you see. And he finally just walked out on stores and wife and children and everything else and got in a boat and started down the Ohio with a boy who could draw leaves well. And he slew birds right and left. He killed more birds than anybody ever in the history of the world, no doubt. He was obsessed with birds. And he had to draw birds. And he hired hunters to get specimens for him, too. He couldn't kill them himself.
His life at the end seemed, even the anguish, simple. Simple at least in that it had to be simply what it was, as he was in the end himself, and not what he had known he ought to be. The blessedness to wake in some dawn and see, as though down a rifle barrel lined up like sights, the self that was, the self that is, and there, far off but in range, completing the alignment, your fate. Hold your breath, let the trigger squeeze be slow and steady. The quarry lifts, in the halo of gold leaves its noble head. This is not a dimension of time.
This poem was written after a long dry spell. I hadn't written a verse in a long time. Sat down one day to write a letter. Instead, I wrote this poem because the first line was handed to me as a gift. The broken ibis. If the legs of the bird be broken, the arrow-legged ibis earth pent, and on wearying wings, having spent her final flight, sinking at last to the dark lake, to death be spoken. How may I, who am seeker and rover, design from wisdom of eagle and dove a philosophy wherein the lover must lay his love?
Their footless dance is of the beautiful liability of their nature. Their eyes are round, boldly convex, bright as a jewel, and merciless. They do not know compassion, and if they did, we should not be worthy of it. They fly in air that glitters like fluent crystal, and his heart is perfectly transparent iron. They cleave it with no effort. They cry in a tongue multitudinous, often like music. He slew them at surprising distances with his gun. Over a body held in his hand, his head was bowed low, but not in grief. He put them where they are, and there we see them, in our imagination. What is love? One name for it is knowledge.
This is an entirely different world from when I came here in the early 1930s. And I say it's not entirely different. too. My viewpoints are different. I think my early ones were a bit romantic, a little bit. And some of that remains. I think I've dealt probably too mildly with some other things in this country. I have yet to mention strip mining. I'm not ready for it yet. I'm stuck back in the Depression years. This is home to me. But I feel good here. And it's the people that hold me here. The land, the country is disappearing. What I knew when I came is gone. But something remains. Something hasn't changed. And I think that holds me here. I want people to read what I write. I certainly do. But they don't, as far as I know, or not in the area. If the people related to me don't read it, if my neighbors don't read what I write, if I'm not aware that anybody I come in contact with in daily life ever read what I write, whom am I writing?
I was first a writer, and I think to appreciate photography you have to get a little basic knowledge of writing. But anyway, I like to share with people the things I see and the way I see them. And that's the reason I do it, I think. I do it whether anybody looks at it or not. I do it to I satisfy myself first, the way I feel about a subject or an object. And then if the editor likes it, I'm happy. If he doesn't, I'm sorry.
Cost advised to be morning equipment left side of the runway just past the short taxi exit beneath the control tower, clear for takeoff.
30, thank you. We're heading east.
Sir, left turn to way is approved. The 150 in the pattern, you might look for him on the crosswind.
30 you.
Here we go.
You have to think of any subject as a radius of 360 degrees around it. At the same time, it has 180 degrees over it. So many scenes are prettier from the air than they are from the ground.
Leap, minnows, leap. The minnows leap in drying pools, in islands of water along the creek bed sands. They spring on drying tails, white bellies to the sun, gills spread, gills fevered and gasping. The creek is sun and sand and fish throats rasping. One pool has a peck of minnows. One living pool is knuckle deep with dying, a shrinking yard of glittering bellies. 1,000 eyes look, look. 1,000 gills strain the water air. There is plenty of water above the dam, locked and deep. Plenty, plenty and held. It is not here. It is not where the minnows spring with lidless fear. They die as men die. Leap, minnows, leap.